Hello, it's so nice to have you here. I welcome you to this space where I want us to reflect calmly together on a subject that's often uncomfortable but necessary. Who is it wise or unwise to share your life with once you reach your 50s, your 60s, or when you begin to enter old age? I want you to think of it this way. At that age, we can't afford to waste energy or time. Time becomes a treasure more valuable than gold, and every single day counts. So we can't give ourselves away to just anyone, and especially not live with people who drain us instead of lifting us up. Look, living together isn't a minor detail. It's one of the most serious decisions you can make. Why? Because in old age, what matters most isn't material wealth. It isn't how much money you have in the bank, nor even the trips you've taken or not taken. What weighs most are the emotions you end your days with. Inner peace, the serenity of being able to close your eyes at night without grudges or noise in your head. That's why the title of this talk is Never Live with These Kinds of People in Old Age, especially once you hit your 50s or 60s. Because if you've already carried a life of responsibility, sacrifice, work, children, obligations, why condemn yourself to share the rest with someone who steals your peace? I'm going to go slowly so you can let this sink in. This isn't about hating anyone or filling yourself with resentment. No. This is about taking care of yourself, setting a healthy boundary, saying, "This is as far as I go." Because old age isn't a time to endure more emotional pain. It's a time to live lightly, calmly, joyfully. Think about it. If someone brings you more tension than relief, if you argue more than you laugh, if being around them makes you feel 10 years older, what's the point of sharing a roof? Life is not negotiable, especially at that stage. You have every right to lovingly choose who accompanies you and who doesn't. And if that means living alone, then welcome solitude, because peaceful solitude is worth infinitely more than toxic company. Today I want to invite you to open your eyes, to look at your surroundings with honesty. Who are you sharing your days with? What emotions does that living arrangement stir in you? Are you free, or are you tied down? Do you have peace, or are you at war? Stay with me, because over the next hour we'll go through, one by one, the profiles of people you should never live with in old age. We'll do it calmly, with examples, with stories that may sound familiar, and I want every word to help you reflect, not to judge anyone, but to choose better. Always remember this: old age isn't the end, it's a new beginning. And that beginning must be filled with respect, tenderness, inner peace. You deserve nothing less. Let's continue step by step, gently, because this is a delicate subject. I've already said it, and I'll repeat it. Old age is not the time to give away your peace. It is sacred time. And if there's one thing that is not negotiable at that age, it's emotional peace. There's one kind of person I want to talk about today. The chronic complainer. The one who always finds something wrong, even when the sun is shining, even when the table is full, even when life has given them countless reasons to be grateful. You know who I mean. The one who makes the simple complicated, the one who drains your enthusiasm, the one who is never satisfied. Imagine waking up every morning beside someone who starts the day with a reproach, a negative look, words that pull you down. How can anyone grow old with dignity like that? You can't. Because constant complaining doesn't just exhaust you, it makes you sick. Living with a chronic complainer robs you of years of life. And if at 50 or 60 you want serenity, that kind of living only subtracts from you. Remember, your energy isn't infinite. In youth, we tolerate more. We let things slide. But after half a century of living, after so much effort, why put up with it? There's no more time for trying to change someone else. That illusion only ends in frustration. And you're not here to carry other people's burdens. You're here to live lighter. A person who complains about everything turns your home into an invisible battlefield. They don't have to yell. Their attitude is enough. That heavy air, that gray cloud that surrounds you. You get up wanting to enjoy your coffee, look at the garden, listen to music, and that person always finds a way to burst your bubble. I'll put it this way. Living with a complainer is choosing sadness as your companion, and in old age, there's no room for that. You deserve to be surrounded by grateful people, people who see what they have instead of what they lack, people who appreciate small gestures, because in the end, life is made of those little things that grow huge when you learn to enjoy them. Maybe right now you're thinking of someone you know, someone who has a place in your life, and maybe it's hard to admit that they've become a burden. It's not easy. It's not about cutting everyone off overnight. It's about choosing, creating emotional distance, deciding what you deserve. So, I invite you to reflect calmly. Do you want to spend your next years hearing that everything is wrong? Or do you want to be surrounded by voices that lift you, encourage you, embrace you with their energy? Don't confuse patience with resignation. Patience is a virtue. Resignation is a prison. And in old age, resigning yourself to living with someone who dims your joy is almost emotional suicide. You have the right to seek fresh air, to say, "This is where I stop." And if that means being alone, don't be afraid. Conscious solitude can be a paradise, because what matters isn't how many people are in the house, it's how you feel inside your own skin. And remember something I want etched in your mind. It's never too late to choose again. No matter your age, you can always decide who you live with and who you don't. Freedom has no expiration date. So let's continue, calmly, slowly, because this subject deserves an open heart. So far, we've talked about the importance of peace and what it means to live with someone who complains about everything. Now, I want to talk to you about another kind of person you should never share a roof with in your later years. The controller. Yes, the one who needs to decide everything. Who tells you how to dress, what to eat, where to go, how to spend your money, even how to think. The one who doesn't accompany you but monitors you. The one who doesn't respect your freedom but cuts it short. Look, by the time you're 50 or 60, you've already lived through a lot. You've raised children, you've worked, sacrificed, learned hard lessons. So what sense does it make to put up with someone who still wants to treat you like a child? That's the great contradiction. In old age, what we most need is space, air, autonomy. And the controller steals all that from you. The controller never rests. They always find something to point out, and they do it with that subtlety that looks like concern but is really control in disguise. They say, "I'm telling you for your own good." But deep down, it's their fear of losing power. And little by little, you shrink, you fade, because every decision ends up in their hands. Do you know what happens when you live with someone like that? You lose your identity. Slowly, you stop being yourself. And when that happens, life becomes unbearable, because old age should be the time when you feel most authentic, most free of masks, most yourself. And yet the controller locks you inside an invisible cage. Sometimes control isn't direct. It's emotional. It can be a disapproving look, a heavy silence, a criticism disguised as advice. And you, just to avoid arguing, end up giving in until one day you realize you don't decide anything anymore. Everything is decided by the other person. Understand this. Living with a controller in old age is dying slowly, because they rob you of the chance to enjoy the stage of life when you most deserve freedom. We weren't born to be monitored. We were born to share life in trust. Look around you. Is there someone nearby who always needs to have a say in what you do? Who gets uncomfortable if you make decisions without asking them? Who doesn't respect your time or your space? If so, be careful. That kind of living will cost you dearly. You don't need anyone's permission to live your life, and certainly not at that age. You've already paid enough emotional dues. You've already given all you had to give. Now it's time to live with your head held high, with the dignity of someone who allows themselves to be free. Healthy coexistence is built on two pillars: respect and trust. Without those, there is no real relationship. It doesn't matter if it's a partner, a child, a sibling, or a friend. Without them, the bond loses its meaning. So my invitation is clear. If you're sharing your days with a controlling person, dare to set boundaries. Say what you think, reclaim your voice. And if that's not enough, have the courage to choose another path. Because what's at stake here is not a detail. It's your very life. And remember, freedom is not a luxury. It's a basic necessity of the soul. Without freedom, there's no peace. And without peace, old age becomes a kind of hell. We've already talked about the complainer, and we've talked about the controller. Now I want to show you another profile of a person you should never live with in your later years. The selfish one. The selfish person thinks only of themselves. They never have time for you, but they always expect you to make time for them. In daily life, their needs are always placed above yours, as if what matters to you holds no value once you've reached your 50s or 60s. Do you know what happens with selfishness? It becomes unbearable, because at that point in life you simply don't have the energy to deal with someone who only stares at their own belly button. In youth, maybe you put up with it. You hold on to illusions. You believe the other person might change. But in old age, there's no margin left for that. Selfishness wears you down, dries you out, chills the soul. A selfish partner always leaves you in second place. And sometimes, just to avoid conflict, you accept it. But eventually, you realize you're always giving more than you receive, and that emotional debt will always end up being paid with sadness. Let me tell you the story of Marta, a woman I met some years ago. Marta was 62 when she came to see me, completely drained. She had lived for decades with a man who thought only of himself. She cooked, cleaned, organized everything, and he lived as if he were alone. He never included her in his decisions, never asked how she was doing, never accompanied her in anything. When the children left home, Marta felt the full weight of that kind of coexistence. There were no more excuses, no more third parties to fill the silence, just the two of them. And that's when it hit her harder than ever. His silence, his indifference, his selfishness in every gesture. One day, Marta looked at herself in the mirror and asked, "Is this what I want for the years I have left?" Her answer was a resounding no. It wasn't easy, but she found courage, confronted him, and told him she would no longer sustain a relationship where everything revolved around his comfort. She chose to separate. At first, she was afraid of solitude, but later she discovered something wonderful: the peace of not having to carry someone who didn't value her. Sometimes we think that living with someone, even if they're selfish, is better than being alone. But the truth is, solitude, when embraced, is far healthier than a companionship that drains you. Selfishness in old age is poison, because in those years, what one needs most is support, tenderness, mutual care. And if the other person can't look beyond their own reflection, that relationship is doomed to be unfair. Let me be clear. Never live with someone who loves only themselves. Because if they haven't learned to see others after a lifetime, they're not going to suddenly learn it at 60. And you are not here to educate. You are here to enjoy. Choose people who give, not just those who take. People who listen, who ask how you're truly doing, who share what they have with you. Because in the end, living together is about sharing. And if there's no reciprocity, there is no real coexistence. Old age is not the time to beg for affection. It's the time to be surrounded by relationships where there is mutual giving. That isn't selfishness, that's healthy love. Take a deep breath with me and think about what we've covered so far. We've seen the damage of living with a complainer, with a controller, with a selfish person. Now let's talk about another very harmful profile, the chronic pessimist. The pessimist is different from the complainer. The complainer gripes about everything, about the daily and immediate. The pessimist, on the other hand, lives with the conviction that everything will turn out badly. It's as if they carry a permanent eclipse in their eyes. And you know what happens when you live with someone like that? Hope starts to fade. Picture this. You wake up eager to start a new project, something small, like starting a tiny business, learning a language, painting a picture. And there's the pessimist, ready to tell you, that won't work. You're too old for that. Why bother? Nothing ever comes of it. Do you realize how much damage that causes? Old age is the time when we most need hope, even if it's something small. Hope keeps the heart alive. When you live with someone who always expects the worst, who never believes in anything, who shoots down every attempt, you start to lose your own spark. Life becomes heavy, and you don't deserve to carry that shadow. Pessimism is contagious. If you live with someone who only sees darkness, sooner or later your mood darkens too, and before you know it, you stop trying, you stop dreaming, you stop looking for joy. That's extremely dangerous in maturity, because hope is medicine. At 50, 60, 70, more than ever, we need to surround ourselves with people who give us reasons to keep going. People who say, go ahead, try it, give it a shot, even if it's not perfect. Because life at that age isn't measured in grand achievements. It's measured in little sparks, small joys that keep us awake inside. Think about this. What would happen if you shared your home with someone who ruins everything with their dark outlook? What would happen to your will to live, your energy? It would be like living under a roof that always leaks, drop by drop, day by day, until you're soaked in discouragement. The pessimist may have their reasons. They may have suffered, seen harsh things. But that doesn't justify dragging someone else into their darkness. You can accompany, you can listen, you can be near, but living together is something else. Living with a chronic pessimist is mortgaging your happiness. Healthy coexistence is light, and without light, there is no life. That's why if you're next to someone who always sees the worst, who always expects the worst, think with your heart. Do you want to spend your remaining years under that storm? The answer, my friend, is almost certainly no. And keep this idea close. Hope is the most essential food in maturity. If you surround yourself with people who believe in nothing, you end up starved in soul. Let's keep walking this path of reflection with the same calmness. We've seen how harmful it is to live with the complainer, the controller, the selfish one, and the chronic pessimist. Now I want to stop at another profile that can be very hard to deal with, the emotional abuser. I don't just mean the one who yells or slams a fist on the table. There's also the silent violence, the kind you don't see but feel like a knife. It's the cold treatment, the calculated indifference, the sarcasm that cuts, the contempt in their words, that everyday violence that leaves no marks on the skin but wounds the soul. In old age, living with someone like this becomes unbearable, because at that age what we most need is tenderness, support, kind treatment. And emotional violence is exactly the opposite. It's contempt, devaluation, humiliation. And let me be very clear. No one deserves to spend their final years surrounded by mistreatment. Some people normalize this violence. They get used to hurtful phrases, to cruel silences, to judgmental looks, and before they know it, they've spent years enduring the unbearable. But old age is not for enduring. It's for healing. It's not for justifying others. It's for taking care of yourself. The emotional abuser often plays with your self-esteem, making you feel small, convincing you you're worthless, repeating that without them you couldn't survive. That's an invisible prison. But even if you can't see the bars, they're there. And living in that cage robs you of your essence, your joy. Think of it this way. Every day you spend with someone who mistreats you is a day you lose of living in peace. And those days don't come back. Time in old age is too valuable to waste enduring violence. You have the right to live with respect. And respect is not negotiable. It is not asked for. It is demanded. If the person you live with cannot treat you with dignity, it doesn't matter how many years you've spent together. It doesn't matter how many memories. It doesn't matter how afraid you are of being alone. It is better to have peaceful solitude than destructive company. Here I want to bring you a phrase I love, one that fits perfectly here. It's from Mahatma Gandhi. Violence is the fear of the ideals of others. Powerful, isn't it? Because the abuser, whether with shouting or with silence, attacks what they cannot control in you, your freedom, your dignity, your way of being. So let me tell you straight from the heart, never spend your later years with someone who abuses you, whether with words, gestures, or silence. Violence is never justified at any age, but in maturity it is doubly cruel because it steals what you need most, inner peace. Surround yourself with people who speak to you with kindness, who look at you with tenderness, who make space for you. You don't need flattery or worship, just respect. Because in old age, what matters most isn't luxury, fame, or money. It's being treated well. Now, let's pause and think about another kind of company that can also be deeply harmful, the completely dependent one. I'm talking about the person who can't fend for themselves, who expects you to solve every detail of their life, who makes your energy serve their constant need. The dependent isn't just someone who occasionally needs help. That happens to all of us. No, this is the person who clings to you as if you were their permanent lifeline. At 50 or 60, when you're looking for calm, tranquility, and a little rest, living with someone like that is exhausting. Because instead of sharing, they turn you into a caretaker. And I don't mean caring with love for someone who is ill or vulnerable. I mean people who could stand on their own but choose not to, because it's easier to lean on you. Excessive dependence robs you of your freedom. It forces you to make decisions that aren't yours, to carry responsibilities that don't belong to you. And what's most dangerous is that in their need, the dependent often ends up erasing you. Not because they're bad, but because they don't know how to live without you. And that is not love. That's suffocation. Old age should be a time for mutual support, for companionship that comes from autonomy, two free people choosing to be together. But with the completely dependent person, that doesn't exist. Everything revolves around their lack, their need, their fear, and little by little, you disappear. Picture this. You want to go out for a walk, enjoy a quiet moment, but that person needs you constantly by their side. You want to plan something for yourself, a trip, an activity, and immediately their insecurity shows up. And what am I supposed to do in the meantime? Little by little, your life stops being your own. Are your final years really worth giving up for someone who refuses to grow? Is it worth mortgaging your freedom in the name of a dependence that will never be satisfied? The answer is clear, isn't it? The dependent may disguise their need as love, but in reality, it's fear. Fear of being alone, fear of facing life, and out of compassion, you might fall into the trap of holding them up. But that always comes at a cost, because love cannot be slavery. You need to share old age with someone who walks beside you, not someone who clings to your back. Maturity is exactly that, the ability to walk lightly, without unnecessary burdens. Remember this strongly. Accompanying is not carrying. Being by someone's side is one thing. Being dragged by them is another. And if someone confuses love with dependence, that living arrangement is doomed to suffering. Life is too short to live imprisoned by someone else's needs. Of course, you can extend a helping hand, but never give away your entire life just to keep someone else standing. Because if you do that, you lose yourself. Old age isn't a time to disappear. It's a time to shine with your own light. Let's move slowly, breathing in these truths like small doses of reality. Up to now, we've talked about the complainer, the controller, the selfish one, the pessimist, the emotional abuser, and the dependent. Today, I want to stop at another profile of person you should never live with in your later years. The envious one. The envious person is dangerous because their poison isn't always visible. They may hide their unease behind a smile, but deep down, your joy, your success, your accomplishments, even your small satisfactions, bother them. They can't stand to see you doing well, and in daily life, that becomes a constant shadow. Do you know what envy does day after day? It robs you of your spontaneity. You start holding back what you share, what you celebrate, what you show, because everything you say sparks an ironic comment, a strange look, a dismissive gesture. Instead of living freely, you live cautiously. And in old age, when what you most need is to savor the simple things, living with someone envious is unbearable. Because instead of rejoicing with you, they compete. Instead of applauding you, they minimize you. Instead of being inspired by your happiness, they turn it into a reason for resentment. Let me tell you the story of Ricardo, a man I once met. Ricardo was 67 years old and had worked his entire life to buy a little house in the countryside. That was his dream. After retiring, he moved there with his longtime partner, imagining a calm stage of life, rest, nature, joy. But his partner couldn't stand that happiness. Every time Ricardo expressed how happy he was in his garden, she'd respond with sarcasm. "Yeah, but this house isn't much. You think you're something just because you own a piece of land?" When he proudly shared small achievements, planting a tree, fixing a fence, she always found a way to belittle it. Over time, Ricardo stopped talking. He stopped sharing his joys because he knew they'd be criticized. His dream turned into a burden. The house he had imagined as paradise became a place of silence and frustration. One day, after much reflection, Ricardo realized what was happening. It wasn't love. It was envy. And he discovered something crucial. If the person you live with can't rejoice in your joy, that person isn't companionship. They're a shadow. He found the courage to separate. At first it was difficult, but little by little he rediscovered the joy of his home, his garden, his life. He found that solitude was lighter than living with someone who dimmed his light. My friend, envy in a relationship is like an invisible leak. It drains your energy without you realizing it. And when you finally notice, you're already dry inside. That's why I tell you, never live with someone who doesn't know how to rejoice in your happiness. Because shared joy multiplies, but shared envy destroys. Old age is a time to laugh with someone who delights in your victories, no matter how small. You don't need someone who envies you. You need someone who inspires you. Choose to surround yourself with people who are happy to see you happy, because if your joy bothers someone, that's not love. It's competition in disguise. And you are not here to compete. You are here to live in peace. Let's continue calmly. We've already talked about complainers, controllers, selfish people, pessimists, abusers, dependents, and the envious. All of them, in one way or another, rob you of peace. Now, let's look at another very difficult profile, the chronic liar. Lies are a silent poison. They don't always explode. they're not always shouted. Often they come as whispers, omissions, half-truths, and when you live with someone who thrives on lies, your whole world trembles, because trust becomes impossible. Coexistence is built on trust. If you can't rely on the other person's word, what can you rely on? By the time you're 50 or 60, you need simple certainties, stability, not grand achievements, just the basics, that what the other person tells you is true. But the chronic liar specializes in disguising reality. They tell you what you want to hear, make up excuses, twist stories, and you start doubting. Doubting what they say, what they promise, what they leave unsaid. Living in constant doubt is exhausting. Lies don't just destroy trust, they destroy self-esteem. You begin asking yourself if you're the problem, if you're exaggerating, if you're being too suspicious, and often the liar manipulates this, making you feel guilty for doubting, when in fact, they are the one shattering transparency. In old age, why would you want that? There's no time left for games, for masks, for double faces. What you need is clarity, honesty, truth. Because truth, even when it hurts, brings peace. Lies, even if sweet at first, always leave bitterness. Living with someone who lies is like living with a ghost. You never know where you stand. And over the years, that becomes unbearable. Because maturity requires stability, transparency. Not perfection, but authenticity. Think about this. If the person you share a home with can't even tell you the truth about small everyday things, what can you expect in the big moments, in the important decisions? Daily lies are just rehearsals for bigger betrayals, and you're not here for rehearsals. You're here for certainty. The chronic liar steals the most valuable thing in coexistence, the tranquility of believing in someone's word. Without that, there is no real home. There might be a roof, furniture, a routine, but not a home. That's why I tell you, never live with someone who makes lying a habit. It doesn't matter if the lies are small or big, they all wear you down. And in your maturity, you can't give away your serenity to someone who doesn't know how to be honest. Truth is the foundation of every healthy relationship. Without it, it's better to let go. Because at that age, more than ever, you need to be surrounded by people who are clear, transparent, who tell you what they really think, even if it's not always what you want to hear. Because lies wound, but truth builds. Reflect on this with me slowly. Old age is a time to choose better, to let go of burdens, to keep what's essential. And among those choices is not living with people who consume you from the inside out. Now let's talk about another profile. The proud person who never apologizes. Pride, when healthy, gives you dignity. It helps you set limits, respect yourself, value who you are. But when pride turns into arrogance, living together becomes a wall. That kind of person is incapable of admitting a mistake, incapable of approaching with humility. They always have to be right, and at 50 or 60, living with someone like that is exhausting. Because sooner or later, in every relationship, conflicts and misunderstandings arise. The natural thing is to sit down, talk, apologize, repair. But with the arrogant, that never happens. They'd rather cling to their position, even if the whole house collapses, even if you suffer, even if the distance between you grows. The most painful part is that the silence of never apologizing becomes a canyon. The wound stays open. A simple apology could close it, but it never comes, and you're left carrying a pain that isn't yours. The proud one who won't apologize turns coexistence into a constant battle. Over time, you end up feeling invisible, as if your emotions don't matter, because the only thing that matters is that they always come out on top, as if admitting a mistake were losing a war. But in old age, why would you want that? Why spend your final years arguing with someone who never lets their guard down, who never comes to you with humility? There's no time for those battles anymore. What you need most is someone who can say, "I was wrong, forgive me." So simple, so human, so healing. Arrogance leaves no space for love, because true love always carries humility. Humility to recognize flaws, to correct them, to apologize. Without that, all that's left is empty pride. So feel this deeply. Never live in your later years with someone who doesn't know how to apologize, because that person, with their silence and their hardness, will end up freezing your heart. And you are not here to live in ice. You are here to live in human warmth. Choose people who can say they're sorry, who can look you in the eye and admit a mistake, not because they're weak, but because they're strong. Because in reality, asking for forgiveness is one of the bravest acts there is. Life, especially in maturity, needs repair, not more wounds, and repair requires humility. If the person you live with doesn't know how to apologize, that relationship is destined to break sooner or later. And before it breaks you, let it go. Always remember this: forgiveness heals more than any medicine. And if forgiveness doesn't exist in your home, that house will never be a true home. Let's keep moving slowly. I want you to feel each word as if it were a mirror where you can see yourself. So far, we've talked about people who, for different reasons, destroy peace in a shared life. The complainer, the controller, the selfish one, the pessimist, the emotional abuser, the dependent, the envious, the liar, the arrogant. Each of them represents a threat to your serenity and maturity. Today, I want to focus on another profile, one that's often more subtle but just as harmful. The negative person who extinguishes your dreams. This isn't exactly pessimism, nor constant complaining, nor envy. It's that constant attitude of clipping other people's wings. Every time you have a project, a desire, a dream, that person makes sure to remind you of everything that can go wrong, everything you don't have, everything you lack. They never support you, never encourage you, never celebrate with you. Their way of being is to extinguish. In youth, maybe you play along. You try to prove that yes, you can. But in old age, that game becomes unbearable. By the time you're 50, 60, or 70, you don't need to prove anything. What you need is to enjoy what you have left, to give yourself permission to try new things, even small things, even if it's only to fill your soul. And yet, there's the negative one, ready to puncture your enthusiasm. It's as if they carried invisible scissors to cut up every idea until little by little you stop dreaming. You stop talking about what you want. You stop daring to try, because you already know the response will be, "You can't. It's useless. It makes no sense." The damage of living with someone like that is silent, but deep, because dreams are fuel, and when someone shuts off that engine, life turns into an empty hallway. Routine becomes a prison, repetition without joy. Think about it. What would happen if, in your maturity, you lived with someone who dimmed you instead of motivating you? What would happen to your will to learn new things, to travel, to make new friends, to seek different experiences? All of that would be smothered by the other's negativity. Old age isn't the time to stop dreaming. On the contrary, it's the time to dream differently, to dream lighter, more authentically, maybe not about conquering the world, but about learning to dance, writing a book, planting a garden, enjoying your grandchildren. And all of that needs air. It needs hope. That's why I say, never live your later years with someone who extinguishes your dreams, because dreams don't expire. As long as you breathe, as long as you live, there will always be a desire moving you forward. And if the person by your side doesn't know how to respect that, they aren't a companion, they're a burden. Surround yourself with people who encourage you, who say, "Go for it, try it. Don't be afraid. Even if it doesn't turn out perfectly, the simple fact of trying is already living. And if someone can't walk with you in that hope, they don't deserve to be in your path. Friend, there's nothing sadder than reaching old age and realizing you stopped dreaming because someone turned off your light. Don't let that happen to you. Let's continue slowly, with an open heart. So far, we've looked at many profiles of people who make shared life in maturity a heavy burden. Each one has shown us, in a different way, how peace can be stolen without us realizing it. Now I want to talk about another type, the emotional manipulator. The manipulator doesn't necessarily shout, doesn't always get angry, doesn't always argue. Their weapon is guilt, through soft words, calculated silences, gestures that seem small. They make you feel like you owe them something, like if you don't do what they want, you're selfish, ungrateful, unloving. Manipulation is dangerous because it so often disguises itself as love. I'm only saying this because I care about you, after everything I've done for you, and you end up believing you have a debt to pay. Living with a manipulator is not freedom. It's submission dressed up as affection. And in old age, friend, there is no room for that. You've carried enough guilt already, as a parent, as a worker, as a child. You don't need more emotional burdens. You need relief, true tenderness, respect. Let me tell you the story of Graciela, a 64-year-old woman I met in therapy. She had spent years living with a man who constantly manipulated her. Every time she wanted to do something for herself, go out with friends, take a course, travel, he would remind her of all the sacrifices he had made for her. And so Graciela gave up her own desires, convinced she owed him her presence all the time. Over the years, she grew dimmer and dimmer, until she reached the point of not knowing what she wanted, what she felt, who she was. Everything she did revolved around him. When she finally came to see me, she said through tears, "I feel like I don't have a life of my own." The day she understood that this wasn't love, but manipulation, she took a huge step. It was difficult. Breaking away from manipulation is hard. We get used to living in that invisible prison. But she dared, regained her independence, allowed herself to do things for herself, and discovered something wonderful. Freedom is not selfishness. It's a basic human need. Here I want to share with you a phrase from Viktor Frankl, a man who survived concentration camps and discovered the meaning of life in the midst of suffering. He said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose, and in our choice lies our growth and our freedom." Powerful, isn't it? Because manipulation robs you of that space, makes you feel like you have no choice. But you always do. Even in old age, even when it seems like everything's been decided, you can still choose not to live under guilt. So I'll say it plainly. Never live with someone who manipulates you emotionally. That's not love. It's slavery disguised as affection. And you weren't made for chains. You were made for wings. Maturity should be the freest stage of life. If someone tries to manipulate you, the bravest choice is to break that cycle, even if it hurts. Even if it's hard, even if it's scary. Because beyond the fear, there is peace. Life is too short to give it away to someone who plays with your guilt. Surround yourself instead with people who give you pure love, without conditions, without blackmail. That is what you deserve. Let's keep walking this path together. Whenever we think of old age, we imagine rest, calm, the joy of finally enjoying what was so hard to build. But that tranquility only comes if we know how to choose wisely who we share our days with. There's another profile that's especially harmful, the one who never values you. I don't mean someone who occasionally forgets to say thank you. I mean the person who lives as if everything you do is just your obligation, as if your gestures, your care, your effort carry no merit. Living with someone like that turns your life into unrecognized labor, invisible sacrifice. In youth, maybe we put up with it, thinking one day the other will notice, that someday gratitude will come. But when you're 50 or 60, there's no more time to wait. Life isn't about promises, it's about feeling valued now. Let me share the story of Ernesto, a 70-year-old man. He had worked his whole life in the fields. He was generous, attentive, always ready to help, but his wife never recognized anything. Every task he did, fixing the house, maintaining the garden, cooking when she was tired, was taken as normal. Never a thank you, never acknowledgement. Over the years, Ernesto began to feel a huge emptiness. He wasn't looking for applause or vanity, just the basic human need to feel that what he did mattered to the person he shared his life with. One afternoon, while with friends, he heard how they laughed and celebrated his stories, how they recognized him for who he was, and he realized something painful. He was more valued outside his own home than within it. That night he told me, he felt deep sadness, but also clarity. If someone doesn't value you, they don't deserve your devotion. Ernesto made a hard decision. He began to set boundaries, to stop giving everything without receiving anything. At first, his wife resisted, but over time she realized he would no longer sustain a relationship where his efforts were invisible. Lack of appreciation in daily life is like living in a house without mirrors. You never see your reflection, and that slowly kills self-esteem. Let me bring you a phrase from Nobel Peace Prize laureate Albert Schweitzer. Sometimes our light goes out, but it is rekindled by another person. Beautiful, isn't it? Because we all need someone who recognizes us, someone who reignites that light when it starts to fade. If the person you live with can't do that, then they're not the right companion for your later years. So I tell you with all my heart, never spend your final years with someone who doesn't value you. Life is too short to be invisible in your own home. Choose people who notice your efforts, who give you sincere thanks, who look you in the eyes and make you feel that what you are and what you do matters. Not because you crave flattery, but because you deserve respect. And respect is shown in everyday appreciation. Old age is not for giving until you're empty. It's for sharing and mutual gratitude. If that doesn't exist, friend, it's better to choose solitude over a bond that erases you. Let's keep walking slowly, as if every word were a lighthouse shining inside you. We've already covered many profiles of people who make life together in maturity unbearable. Today, I want to pause on another type who can also ruin your peace: the emotionally immature. The immature person never really grew up, no matter how many years pass. They may be 50, 60, 70, but their reactions belong to someone who never learned to take responsibility for themselves. They're easily offended, throw tantrums like a spoiled child, dodge responsibilities, and expect you to fix everything. Living with someone like that is exhausting, because while you seek serenity, they turn the home into a stage for outbursts. And the saddest part is they often don't even realize it. They think their behavior is normal, when in fact they force you to always take the adult role, the caretaker, the stabilizer. At 50 or 60, after a lifetime of sacrifice, do you really deserve to be the parent of your partner? No, it isn't fair. Healthy living together means two adults supporting each other, not one adult and one who refuses to grow up. Emotional immaturity shows in small things: irresponsible spending they expect you to fix, anger when things don't go their way, dramatic scenes over trivial issues, inability to talk without shouting or playing the victim. And with the years, this becomes unbearable. Because old age needs calm, not drama, shared responsibility, not whims. The immature person makes simple things difficult. What should be light, they make heavy. Think about it. What would happen if, in your later years, you lived with someone who reacts like an eternal teenager? What would happen to your peace, your serenity, your desire for a calm life? You'd end up tired, drained, feeling like instead of sharing life, you're raising someone. So let me be clear. Never live with someone who doesn't take responsibility for themselves. If they haven't learned to mature in a lifetime, they won't suddenly do so at 60, and you are not here to educate. You are here to enjoy what remains. Emotional maturity isn't about age, but about the ability to handle responsibilities, manage emotions, apologize, and nurture relationships. Without that, life together becomes a burden. Friend, you deserve a true partner, not another child. Life has already given you enough responsibilities. Don't take on another one in your later years. Remember this: maturity is not measured in wrinkles, but in attitudes. And if someone never learned to grow up, it isn't your job to raise them now. Your task is to protect your peace. We've talked about complainers, controllers, selfish ones, pessimists, abusers, dependents, envious, liars, the arrogant, and the immature. Each one holds up a mirror showing us what we must avoid to preserve our peace. Today I want to talk about yet another type, the indifferent. The indifferent doesn't shout, doesn't manipulate, doesn't necessarily hurt with words, but their constant silence, their lack of interest, their coldness, those end up wounding as deeply as any insult. Indifference is absence disguised as presence. You're in the same house, but they're not really there. You share the roof, but not the life. Indifference in old age is lethal, because at that stage, what we most need isn't luxury or grand gestures. It's simply to feel seen, to feel accompanied. We're not talking about expensive gifts or exaggerated words, just small gestures, a "how are you?" an attentive look, a hug when it's needed. Living with someone indifferent is living with emptiness. It's sitting at the table and feeling the other person isn't listening. It's sharing a bed, but feeling alone. It's speaking and getting no response. Indifference is the desert of the soul. In youth, maybe work, children, or projects distract us. But in maturity, when the external noise quiets down, indifference is felt more sharply. Silence grows heavy, absence grows larger. And that can turn into a very deep wound. Think about it. Why would you want to spend your last years with someone who doesn't look at you, who doesn't care, who doesn't even notice you? Why settle for an empty presence when you could choose to be surrounded by people who make you feel alive? Indifference isn't always cruelty. Sometimes it's incapacity, sometimes habit. But whatever the cause, the effect is the same. It drains you, dries you up, makes you feel invisible. And friend, you were not made to become invisible at 60. You were made to shine. So I'll say it clearly. Never live with someone indifferent. Because that isn't life. It's pretense. And old age isn't for pretending. It's for living with authenticity. Love, the real kind, is always visible. There's no need for shouting, no need for perfection. Love and connection show themselves. They show in attention, in genuine interest, in tenderness. And if those things aren't there, there's no real bond. Indifference kills slowly. That's why if you live with someone who treats you as if you don't exist, you need the courage to ask yourself, what am I doing here? Because the opposite of indifference isn't overwhelming passion, it's conscious presence. And that's what you deserve. Always remember, indifference hurts more than anger, because at least anger acknowledges your existence. Indifference erases you, and you're not here to be erased from your own story. I want us to reach the close of this first theme slowly, like closing a book that left deep marks. We've gone through many profiles of people whose presence in old age becomes a heavy weight. The complainer, the controller, the selfish one, the pessimist, the emotional abuser, the dependent, the envious, the liar, the arrogant, the immature, and the indifferent. Each one shows clearly how peace can be destroyed in the most important years of your life. But before closing, I want to make something very clear. This subject is not only for women. Often we talk about women in old age, about how they carry the burden of living together, about how many of them end up holding up unfair relationships. And yes, that exists. We've seen it in the stories we've shared. But this message is also for men. Because there are many men who live with complaining women, with controlling women, with indifferent women. Men who endure in silence, who suffer quietly, who say nothing out of shame or fear of being judged. The truth is that toxic coexistence has no gender. Pain does not distinguish between men and women. Old age is a challenge for all. Both men and women need to surround themselves with healthy connections, with relationships that add, not subtract. That's why everything we've said so far is an open invitation to everyone. Never spend your later years with people who steal your joy, who drain your energy, who don't know how to value you. This first theme we've worked through together was strong, I know, because talking about who not to live with is, in some way, looking in the mirror. It's recognizing that maybe today you're standing beside someone who has these traits, and that's not easy to admit. But truth, even when it hurts, sets you free. Here's what I want you to keep engraved in your heart. Old age is not for surviving, it's for living with dignity. And that means choosing carefully who you share your time, your energy, your love with. If your house is full of complaints, control, selfishness, lies, or indifference, then that house is not a home. It may be a roof, it may be a habit, it may be something you've gotten used to, but it's not a home, and you are not here for empty habits. You are here for a full life. This message is for you, woman, and also for you, man. It doesn't matter your age, it doesn't matter your gender. What matters is your essence. We all deserve respect. We all deserve tenderness. We all deserve peace. And if we've learned anything in this time together, it's this. It's never too late to choose again. Never too late to set a boundary. Never too late to recover your peace. Old age can actually be a rebirth. And that rebirth begins with choosing wisely who you want to walk beside. And so we close this first theme. A hard but necessary journey. A call to open your eyes, to not resign yourself, to not accept a coexistence that dims your soul. Because your life has value, because you have value, and because peace is not a luxury, it's a right. Now I want us to begin a new journey. Just as we spoke about the people you should never live with in old age, now we'll look at the other side of the coin. Because life isn't only about avoiding what harms you, it's also about recognizing and embracing what nourishes you. The title of this second theme is simple, but deep. People you should live with in old age, and I want you to feel it as a call to choose well, to value what you already have close, and to open the door to relationships that bring peace, tenderness, and joy. In maturity, more than ever, you need people who are balm, not storm. People who soothe, who walk beside you, who rejoice in your joys, and who are present in your sorrows. People who know how to listen without judging, who don't try to change you, who simply enjoy who you are. Let's begin with a beautiful profile, the grateful person. Living with someone grateful is living with someone who sees the good in the small things, who recognizes your gestures, who values your presence. That everyday gratitude transforms a house into a warm home. You don't need flowers every day. All it takes is a sincere thank you, a smile, an honest recognition of what you do. Let me tell you the story of Clara, a woman of 59 I met in a workshop. Clara had lived a hard life. She worked from a very young age, raised her children alone, and went through many trials. By that point in her life, she thought sharing a home would just mean routine, without much emotion. But then she met Julian, a man who had also gone through loss and hardship. What surprised her most about him wasn't a big gesture or an expensive gift. It was his ability to be grateful. Every time she cooked, Julian would say, "This is delicious. Thank you for taking the time." Every time she went with him to a medical appointment, he expressed how much he valued her presence. And so what seemed ordinary became special. Clara told me that, for the first time in a long while, she felt seen, recognized. She discovered that living with someone grateful meant living with someone who didn't take anything for granted. And that, in old age, is worth gold. Gratitude changes daily life. It makes effort feel lighter, gives routine a new flavor, makes days easier to carry. And it doesn't matter if it's a partner, a friend, a sibling, a companion. Gratitude always beautifies the relationship. That's why I tell you, seek to live with grateful people, because they multiply your joy in the simplest way, by valuing you. Old age is not for indifference. It's for mutual gratitude. Living with someone grateful is like having the sun inside your home. Even on gray days, there's always a ray of light. After talking so much about what to avoid, I want you to keep this in mind. There are people worth sharing life with in maturity, and one of them, without a doubt, is the grateful person. Let's move on. We've spoken about the importance of living with grateful people, because gratitude is a balm that softens the days. Now let's think of another profile that makes old age kind. The person who truly knows how to listen. Listening, my friend, is not just hearing. Hearing is perceiving sounds. Listening is opening the heart to understand what the other feels. Living with someone who listens is a huge gift, because it means you have by your side someone who validates you, who makes you feel important, who shows you with their attention that your voice matters at 50, at 60. We no longer need to convince anyone. We no longer need to win arguments. What we most need is a space where we can speak without fear, without interruptions, without judgment. And when you live with someone who listens, the home becomes a refuge. The person who knows how to listen doesn't always have answers. Often all they do is accompany you with silence, with a look, with a hand on yours. And that simple gesture can heal deep wounds, because the human heart, more than solutions, needs understanding. Think of the difference. Living with someone who always cuts you off, who minimizes what you say, who rushes to give advice without truly understanding. That's frustrating. It makes you feel invisible. But living with someone who truly listens, that feeds the soul. And the most beautiful thing is that listening costs nothing. It doesn't require degrees or money, just presence. The presence of someone who knows how to pause their own world to enter yours. In old age, when society sometimes pushes us aside or ignores us, living with someone who listens is reclaiming your place. It's feeling once again that what you think matters, that your story has value, that your emotions deserve to be named. So I say this with my heart. Seek to live with people who truly listen, because they make the passage of time lighter, not only because they ease your burdens, but also because they remind you that you're still valuable, that your voice still has a place in this world. The silence of genuine listening has more power than 1,000 empty words. And when someone truly listens, they don't just understand you, they embrace you. That's why, if you're choosing who to share your later years with, look beyond superficial company. Ask yourself, does this person listen to me? Do they care about what I feel? Do they give me their attention without hurry? If the answer is yes, then that's a treasure worth keeping. Remember this, listening is one of the purest forms of love, and in old age, what we need most is love in its simplest forms. Let's keep walking slowly. We've spoken about the grateful person and the one who knows how to listen. Now I want to talk about another profile that fills life with energy. The optimist. The one who finds light even in gray days. Optimism doesn't mean denying reality or living in fantasy. It means choosing to focus on what can still be done, what's still good, what still holds value. And living with someone like that is like having a window always open to the sun. At 50, 60, or 70, dark days can come, illness, loss, painful memories. And that's natural. Life brings its blows. But when you share those days with someone who knows how to find a reason to smile, the burden is lighter. The optimist reminds you that there's always something to be grateful for, even if it's small. Living with a pessimist, as we saw before, dims you. Living with an optimist lights you up. They transform the ordinary into something special. A simple meal becomes a celebration. A walk becomes an adventure. A conversation becomes hope. I want to share a phrase I find perfect for this profile. It's from Helen Keller, a woman who was both deaf and blind, and yet became a symbol of resilience. She said, "Keep your face to the sunshine, and you cannot see a shadow." That's exactly what an optimist does. They help you look toward the light. They don't erase the shadows, but they remind you that shadows aren't the whole story. Living with someone like that is medicine for the soul, because optimism inspires, motivates, and spreads. Hope is indispensable, even in the final years. Shared optimism is strength. It lifts you up, makes you try new things, makes you laugh, even when the reasons aren't perfect. It shows you that every day, no matter how hard, holds a corner of beauty waiting to be found. That's why I say, seek to live with optimists. Because old age doesn't need more darkness. It needs light. And the optimist doesn't just brighten their own life. They brighten yours. Choose to be with someone who encourages you to look forward, who reminds you there are still paths to walk, moments to enjoy. Because optimism is not naivety, it's courage. The courage to believe that even with everything, life is still worth living. We've now talked about the grateful person, the one who listens, and the optimist. Today, I want to highlight another essential profile. The supportive one. The person who knows how to accompany you and lend a hand without you even having to ask. Solidarity in daily life is pure gold. It's not only about being there in big moments, but also in small ones. Preparing a cup of tea for two, giving you a hand when something gets complicated, sharing tasks without you having to insist. This is the person who understands that living together isn't about taking advantage, but about mutual help. In old age, more than ever, we need that kind of presence. Because the body doesn't respond the same, energy wanes, and support becomes essential. Living with a supportive person means having the assurance that you're not alone, that someone cares, someone pays attention, someone truly worries about your well-being. And the beauty of solidarity is that it's not about perfection, it's about willingness. A small gesture can make the difference. Handing you a glass of water when you need it, accompanying you to the doctor, listening when you don't feel like talking. It's someone who doesn't wait for you to beg, but anticipates your needs, because they care. Living with someone unsupportive is like rowing alone in a raging river, exhausting. But living with someone supportive is like rowing together. When you tire, the other keeps going, and the boat never stops. Think about it concretely. How does it feel to come home and know you don't have to ask for everything? How does it feel to share your days with someone who naturally cares for you as much as for themselves? That is the magic of solidarity. And let's be clear, solidarity isn't about sacrificing yourself until you disappear. Real solidarity comes from healthy love, not obligation. And in old age, when energy is limited, solidarity is a huge relief. So I tell you, seek to live with supportive people, those willing to give and receive, because reciprocity turns a house into a place of peace and mutual care. Old age is not a test of endurance, not a competition to see who can bear more. It's for sharing with someone who understands that two shoulders carry better than one. Remember this: everyday solidarity sustains more than grand speeches. Because at the end of the day, what matters are not the words, but the gestures. And those gestures are what transform a house into a home. Let's keep moving forward. We've spoken about the grateful, the listener, the optimist, the supportive. Now let's focus on another beautiful profile: the tender one. Tenderness is not weakness. On the contrary, it's one of the bravest forms of love. Tenderness is care, delicacy, the ability to treat someone with gentleness, even in the middle of storms. And living with a tender person in old age is a true gift, because every day they remind you that affection, warmth, and humanity still exist. Tenderness shows in small things: a hug at the right time, a softly spoken word, a cup of tea shared slowly, a look that says, "I'm with you." At 50 or 60, what we need most isn't grand gestures, but that simple tenderness that makes the heart feel accompanied. Let me tell you the story of Elena and Roberto. They had been together more than 30 years, through crises, illnesses, and hardships. When Elena got sick and faced a long treatment, Roberto didn't give her speeches or promises. What he gave her was tenderness. Each morning, he calmly prepared her breakfast. He didn't talk about the illness. He talked about beautiful things: the garden, a shared memory, a plan for the future. When she grew tired, he sat beside her and simply held her hand. Nothing more was needed. That gesture, that tenderness, was the medicine that sustained her most. Elena told me in one conversation, "I don't know if I could have endured without Roberto's tenderness. More than medicine, what kept me going was feeling someone looked at me with love." That is the power of tenderness, and not only in illness, but in daily life. Growing old can be tough: aches in the body, losses, heavy memories. But with a tender person by your side, all of it becomes lighter. Living with someone tender doesn't mean life without conflict. It means that even in conflict, there's respect, there's care. It means no shouting, no humiliation, no trampling. It means speaking softly, seeking to understand, embracing in the middle of differences. That's why I say, seek to live with tender people, because tenderness can't be bought or forced. Tenderness comes naturally from the heart. And when, in old age, you share your life with someone like that, every day carries a sweetness that makes everything more bearable. Remember this: tenderness extends life more than any medicine. The body may weaken, but a soul wrapped in tenderness stays strong until the end. Take a deep breath with me and think about how beautiful it is when someone truly walks with you. Because beyond difficulties, what sustains life and maturity isn't just health or money, it's relationships. And within those relationships, there's another profile worth highlighting: the person who inspires you to grow, even at 50, 60, or 70. Inspiration has nothing to do with pressure or demands. The person who inspires doesn't force you. They lift you up. They don't criticize what you don't do. They encourage you to see what you still can. And at that age, my friend, there's still so much left to discover. Living with someone who inspires is like living with someone who opens windows to new horizons. Maybe you thought everything was already said, that there were no new paths. And suddenly that person says, "Why don't you try? What if we learn something new? What if we dare to take on this challenge together?" That spark of inspiration is a motor reminding you it's never too late. The opposite is living with someone who holds you back, who tells you you're too old, that it's not worth it, that you should just stay still. That kind of company dims life. But living with someone who inspires makes you feel young in spirit, even if your body carries years. And often, the inspirer doesn't even need big speeches. They inspire through example, by getting up with enthusiasm, by trying even if they don't succeed at everything, by showing eagerness to learn, to laugh, to explore. That energy is contagious, because life, at its core, is contagious attitudes. In old age, inspiring one another is a gift, because nothing is sadder than feeling everything is over, and nothing more beautiful than realizing you can still reinvent yourself, that small projects with meaning still await, that life still holds surprises. Living with someone who inspires makes every day feel worthwhile, because they remind you your story isn't finished, that each dawn is a new chapter, and in maturity, that feeling is indispensable for avoiding apathy. So, let me tell you clearly, seek to live with people who inspire you to grow. Inspiration is food for the soul, and without it, old age becomes empty repetition. Remember, inspiring is not the same as demanding. The one who demands drains you. The one who inspires lifts you. That's the difference. And in maturity, you don't need demands. You need wings. Let's continue slowly. So far, we've talked about grateful people, good listeners, optimists who light up life with their positive outlook, and supportive companions. Now I want to pause on another beautiful profile, the person who knows how to give tenderness. Tenderness is not weakness. On the contrary, it is one of the bravest forms of love. Tenderness is care, gentleness, the ability to treat another with softness even in the middle of life's storms. And living with someone tender in old age is a true gift, because it reminds you every day that affection still exists, that simple gestures still matter, that humanity is still alive. Tenderness shows itself in small things, in a hug at the right time, in a word spoken softly, in sharing a moment without hurry, in a look that says, "I'm here with you." At 50, at 60, what we most need isn't grand gestures, but that simple tenderness that makes the heart feel accompanied. Let me tell you the story of Elena and Roberto. They had been together for more than 30 years. They had gone through crises, illnesses, and difficult moments. When Elena became ill and had to go through a long treatment, Roberto didn't offer speeches or exaggerated promises. What he gave her was tenderness. Every morning he calmly prepared her breakfast. He didn't talk to her about the illness. He spoke about the garden, about a shared memory, about a plan for the future. When she grew tired, he simply sat beside her and held her hand. Nothing more was needed. That gesture, that tenderness, was the medicine that sustained her the most. Elena once told me, "I don't know if I would have endured without Roberto's tenderness." More than the medicine, what kept me going was feeling that someone looked at me with love. That is the power of tenderness, and not only in sickness, but also in daily life, because aging can be hard, aches, losses, heavy memories. But when you have someone tender by your side, all of that becomes more bearable. Living with someone tender doesn't mean living without conflicts. It means that even in conflicts there is respect, there is care. It means there's no shouting, no humiliation, no trampling over each other. It means speaking with gentleness, trying to understand, embracing even in the middle of disagreements. That's why I tell you, seek to live with tender people. Because tenderness cannot be bought or forced. It flows naturally as a reflection of the heart. And when, in old age, you live with someone like that, every day carries a sweetness that makes everything easier. Remember this: tenderness prolongs life more than any medicine. The body may grow sick, but a soul embraced with tenderness stays strong until the end. And beyond the difficulties, what sustains life in maturity is not only health or money, but relationships. And within those relationships, there is a profile of person who is always worth living with, the one who inspires you to grow, even when you're 50, 60, or 70 years old. Inspiration is not about pressure or demands. The person who inspires doesn't force you. They encourage you. They don't criticize what you don't do. They motivate you to discover what you still can. And at that age, friend, there is still so much to discover. Living with someone who inspires you is living with someone who opens new horizons. Maybe you thought everything was already said, that there were no new paths left, and suddenly that person appears and says, "Why don't you try? What if we learn something new? What if we face this challenge together?" That spark of inspiration becomes a force that reminds you it's never too late. The opposite is living with someone who holds you back, who says you're too old, that it's not worth it, that it's better to stay still. That kind of company extinguishes life. But living with someone who inspires you makes you feel young in spirit, even if your body carries the years. An inspiring person doesn't need great speeches. Often they inspire simply by example. You see them get up with enthusiasm, see them try even if they don't always succeed. You see them eager to learn, to laugh, to experiment. That energy is contagious, because in the end, life is exactly that, a contagion of attitudes. In old age, mutual inspiration is a blessing. There's nothing sadder than feeling like everything is over. And there's nothing more beautiful than discovering that you can still reinvent yourself, that there are still small projects full of meaning, that life still holds surprises. Living with someone who inspires you means feeling every day is worthwhile, because that person reminds you your story isn't over, that each sunrise is a new chapter. And in maturity, friend, that feeling is essential to avoid falling into apathy. Remember this, to inspire is not to demand. The one who demands wears you down. The one who inspires lifts you up. That is the difference. And in your mature years, you don't need demands. You need wings. Let's keep moving forward slowly. So far, we've talked about grateful people, good listeners, optimists, supportive companions, those who give tenderness, those who inspire, and now another essential profile, the loyal person, the one who stays by your side even when the wind blows against you. Loyalty is a tremendous value, and in shared life it shows in the details. It's not just about not betraying, it's about being present. The loyal one doesn't abandon you when things get hard. They don't disappear when health fails. They don't leave you alone in the middle of the storm. Their constant presence becomes a refuge. Living with someone loyal in old age is having the certainty that no matter what happens, that person will be there. And that gives you immense peace, because at that stage of life, you already know difficulties, losses, and changes will come. And there's nothing more reassuring than having someone who, instead of running away, stays. The absence of loyalty, on the other hand, is devastating. Feeling you can't trust, that someone may fail you at any moment, fills you with anxiety. But when loyalty exists, trust becomes the foundation, and on that foundation, a true home is built. Let me tell you the story of Rosa and Miguel. Rosa was 68 when she was diagnosed with a serious illness. Many around her began to drift away. Some friends stopped visiting. Some family members only appeared from time to time. But Miguel, her companion for 15 years, never left her side. She told me that even in her hardest days, Miguel was there, going with her to the doctor, holding her hand when she was afraid, cooking her favorite food when she didn't want to eat. He didn't give speeches or exaggerated promises. His loyalty was expressed in actions, in his daily presence, in the simple certainty that he wouldn't leave. That's loyalty. And when you live with someone like that, old age becomes less frightening. because you know you're not alone. That's why I tell you, seek to live with loyal people, because loyalty is a shield that protects your peace. It is the silent force that gives you courage. So now, friend, we've gone through a long path together. We talked first about the people with whom you should never live in old age. The complainers, the controlling, the selfish, the pessimists, the emotionally violent, the dependent, the envious, the liars, the arrogant, the immature, and the indifferent. And then we opened the other side of the coin. We spoke of the grateful, the good listeners, the optimists, the supportive, the tender, the inspiring, the loyal, and the joyful. Do you see the difference? One group steals your peace, the other multiplies it. One drains your energy, the other restores it. One makes old age a burden, the other makes it a gift. The message of this entire journey is simple but powerful. In your later years, choose carefully who you live with. Don't settle for mere company. Seek relationships that give you peace, tenderness, respect, and joy. Old age is not to endure. It is to live with dignity. And dignity means surrounding yourself with people who know how to love well. Because life, until the last breath, is too precious to waste on toxic company. His loyalty was in his constant presence. Rosa told me a phrase that stayed with me. In the middle of my illness, I discovered that the most valuable thing wasn't the cure. It was his loyalty. I felt that no matter what happened, I was not alone. That is the magic of living with someone loyal. They don't take away the pain, but they make sure you don't go through it alone. And in old age, my friend, that is worth more than any wealth. That's why I tell you from the heart, seek to live with loyal people, because in maturity what brings the most peace is not luxury or achievements, but the certainty of having someone who stays. Loyalty is a balm that heals loneliness. Old age is not for surrounding yourself with unstable presences. It is for sharing life with those who choose to stay. Because in the end, what heals the most is that certainty. I am not alone. I have someone walking with me. Let's keep going calmly. We've already seen how valuable it is to live with grateful people, good listeners, optimists, supportive companions, those who are tender, inspiring, and loyal. Each one of these profiles brings a different ingredient that turns old age into a time of peace. Today, I want to talk to you about another profile, the person with a healthy sense of humor. Humor, my friend, is a gift of the soul. I'm not talking about cruel mockery or bitter sarcasm. I mean the kind of humor that lightens the load, that turns a gray day into a moment of shared laughter. Living with someone who has a sense of humor is living with someone who helps you carry life with more lightness and maturity. When the body begins to ache, when routines slow down, when losses weigh heavy, laughter becomes medicine. And if you have someone who knows how to make you laugh, even with silly things, your heart rests. Shared humor strengthens bonds, because laughing together creates complicity, generates beautiful memories, and unites. Living with someone who knows how to find reasons to smile makes life lighter. Even problems seem less serious when there's laughter in the middle of them. Think about it in concrete terms. How would it feel to wake up every morning and hear a comment that makes you smile? How would it feel to face a hard day with someone who, instead of complaining or dramatizing, chooses to laugh at themselves and passes that attitude on to you? That not only brings joy, it heals. A sense of humor in old age is not a luxury, it's a necessity. A heart that laughs ages more slowly. Laughter releases tension, eases pain, strengthens the spirit. And when laughter is shared, it multiplies. Of course, not everyone has that capacity. Some people take themselves too seriously, live trapped in solemnity, and that makes life heavy. But someone who knows how to laugh at the everyday, at the simple, makes life kinder. That's why I tell you, look for those who preserve their sense of humor, because that quality makes routine sparkle, makes days feel bright, makes living together not just bearable but joyful. Remember something important. Shared laughter is a direct bridge to the heart, and in maturity, when everything feels slower, that bridge is more necessary than ever. Today, I want to add another indispensable profile: the person who respects your individuality. Respect, my friend, is the foundation of every healthy relationship. And I don't just mean respect in the big things like fidelity or honesty. I'm talking about everyday respect for your time, your space, your decisions. The person who respects you understands that you are unique, and that even though you share a roof and a life, you still have the right to be yourself. Living with someone who respects your individuality is living with someone who doesn't invade you, who doesn't try to mold you, who doesn't make you feel bad for being who you are. On the contrary, they value you precisely because of that difference. And in old age, that is vital, because after so many lived years, the last thing you need is someone trying to change you. Let me tell you the story of Don Alberto and Teresa. They met later in life, already past 60. Don Alberto was passionate about reading. He could spend hours with his books. Teresa, on the other hand, loved dancing and going out with her friends. Many people told them they were too different, that the relationship would never work. But do you know what the secret to their life together was? Respect. Teresa never reproached Alberto for his afternoons of reading. On the contrary, she asked him what he was reading and showed interest in his stories, and Alberto never tried to stop Teresa's enthusiasm for dancing. He took her to her classes, waited patiently, and enjoyed seeing her happy. One day, in a group discussion, Teresa said something beautiful. "I don't need Alberto to dance with me. It's enough that he respects my joy in dancing." That phrase stayed with me because it holds the essence. When there is respect for individuality, life together becomes shared freedom. And now I want to bring you a famous quote that sums this up perfectly. It's from Khalil Gibran, the Lebanese poet and philosopher, who said, "Let there be spaces in your togetherness, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you." How wonderful. Because that is exactly what respect in coexistence is. Space. Not living stuck together all the time, not canceling each other out, not suffocating, but sharing in freedom, in the acceptance that the other can have their passions, their tastes, their own world. In old age, my friend, that is fundamental, because what we want most is peace, not submission. We want to share, not lose our identity. That's why I tell you from the heart, seek to live with people who respect your individuality, because true companionship is not the one that cages you, it's the one that frees you. Respect makes living together light, where each one can be who they are without fear, without guilt, without reproach. And when that exists, the home is filled with peace. Let's keep walking this path calmly. We've already talked about the grateful person, the good listener, the optimist, the supportive, the tender, the inspiring, the loyal, the one who keeps a sense of humor, and the one who respects your individuality. Each of these profiles is a jewel for living well in maturity. Today I want to stop at another equally valuable profile, the person who motivates you to take care of yourself. Old age does not mean neglect. On the contrary, it is the stage where we most need to pay attention to our body, our mind, our emotions. But many times routine, fatigue, or sadness make us give up. And that is where the immense value of living with someone who motivates you to care for yourself appears. That person does not demand or criticize. They don't harshly say, "You have to do this." Instead, they accompany you with tenderness. They lovingly remind you to go to the doctor, invite you to walk together, encourage you to eat better, push you to do things that keep you active. And they do it out of love, not imposition. Living with someone like that is living with a guardian of your well-being. They don't let you fall into neglect. They lift you up with small gestures. That person understands that health is not only physical, it is also emotional. That's why they don't just say, "Take care of yourself." They also take care of your spirit, your joy, your peace. In old age, neglect can be very dangerous. Many people stop getting checkups, abandon activities, lock themselves into routine. But living with someone who motivates you to care for yourself can make the difference between aging with fullness or aging with sadness. Think of it concretely. How does it feel when someone lovingly says, "Let's go for a walk together," instead of reproaching you for not doing it? How does it feel when someone prepares a healthy meal for both of you instead of criticizing what you eat? That difference changes everything. Healthy motivation is born of love, not judgment. So I tell you from the heart, seek to live with people who motivate you to take care of yourself, because they are the ones who remind you every day that your life matters, your body matters, your joy matters. Old age is not a time for neglect. It is a time to honor what you have. And the best way to honor it is to surround yourself with those who inspire you to stay standing, active, alive. Always remember, those who truly love you take care of your life. And they do it not with fear, but with tenderness. That is the kind of person worth having close in the years of maturity. Now, I want to talk to you about another indispensable profile. The person who knows how to have respectful dialogue. Dialogue is the foundation of any shared life. Age doesn't matter. Time spent together doesn't matter. If there is no dialogue, there is no relationship. And I don't mean talking a lot, but talking well. The person who knows how to dialogue does not shout, does not humiliate, does not interrupt. They listen, they respond, they seek to understand. Living with someone like that is worth it, because every difference, every problem can be resolved without destroying the bond. In maturity, respectful dialogue becomes even more important, because at that stage of life, no one wants endless battles. They want peace. And many times, conflicts don't come from big issues, but from small things. Who washes the dishes? What show to watch on TV? How to organize expenses? If those things are not discussed with respect, they end up becoming enormous cracks. Living with someone who knows how to dialogue is a relief, because you know you can express what you feel without fear of being judged. You know that even if there are differences, the other won't use your words as weapons. You know that in the end, understanding will prevail over ego. The opposite is living with someone who turns every conversation into an argument, every disagreement into a war. And at 50 or 60, who has the energy for that? No one. What you need is calm. And calm only comes when dialogue is a bridge, not a battlefield. The person who knows how to dialogue won't always agree with you, and that's fine. Respect doesn't eliminate differences, it makes them manageable. Healthy dialogue doesn't aim to win, but to understand. And living with someone who understands that makes the home a place of encounter, not of war. I want you to feel it this way. Look to live with someone you can talk to about everything, from the smallest things to the deepest matters. Because forced silence kills, but shared words heal. In old age, there's no time for endless arguments or childish pride. What there is a need for understanding, for tenderness in words, for mutual listening. And the person who knows how to engage in dialogue gives you exactly that, a home where voices cross without wounding. I want you to take a deep breath and think about what it really means to share life. Because living together is not just about occupying the same roof, it's about building, day by day, a space where both of you can grow. And there's a type of person who makes that building possible. The empathetic person, the one who knows how to put themselves in your place. Empathy is that ability to feel with the other, to understand what they're going through, even if they don't say it in words. In coexistence, empathy is a golden key, because life in maturity brings difficult moments, physical pain, heavy memories, new fears. And if by your side there is someone empathetic, those moments become lighter. The empathetic one doesn't judge you, doesn't tell you, you're exaggerating. The empathetic one listens and understands, even without living through the same thing as you. They pause, look you in the eyes, and say with their gestures, "I get you, I'm with you." And that feeling is profoundly healing. Living with someone without empathy, on the other hand, is like talking to a wall. You feel alone even when accompanied. But living with someone empathetic is feeling that your pain isn't ignored, that your joys are shared, that your life truly matters. Empathy doesn't always require words. Sometimes it's in the silence of someone who stays beside you when you cry, in the hand that holds you when you're afraid, in the smile that says, "I understand you," without the need for long speeches. That is the power of empathy. At 50, at 60, what we seek most is precisely that. Someone who understands us, not someone to hand us magical solutions, but someone who makes us feel we're not alone. And the empathetic person gives you that every single day. Think about it. How would your life be if each of your emotions found an echo in the person beside you? How would it feel to go through old age accompanied by someone who truly understands your inner world? That is what turns coexistence into a refuge. I'll tell you clearly, seek to live with empathetic people, because empathy is not learned in a book. It is lived with the heart. And when someone has it, coexistence becomes a safe space where you can be yourself without fear of judgment. Remember something important. Empathy is the purest form of silent love. And in old age, silent love is worth more than 1,000 words. I want us to continue slowly, because this journey is not just a list of profiles. It is also a call to look inward and choose wisely. In maturity, every companion you choose can be either a bridge toward peace or a weight that ruins what remains of your life. Today, I want to talk to you about a profile I find essential and often forgotten. The empathetic person, the one who has the ability to put themselves in your shoes without long explanations. Empathy is not pity. Pity puts you above the other. Empathy puts you beside them. It is sensitivity that allows you to feel with someone, to share their joy or their pain without taking it over. And in coexistence, that becomes an immense treasure. Imagine living with someone who, when you're tired, doesn't demand from you, but offers relief. Who, when they see you quiet, doesn't accuse you of coldness, but comes closer and gently asks, "Are you okay?" Who, when you're going through a bad day, instead of criticizing you, gives you silence and presence. That is empathy. The empathetic person turns the house into a refuge. It doesn't matter if outside there are problems, if the world is noisy, if the years weigh heavy. With someone empathetic by your side, you always have a place where you can be yourself, without masks, without fear of judgment. In old age, empathy becomes even more important, because with the years we sometimes feel that no one listens anymore, that no one understands what we're going through. Children live their own lives, friends drift away, and the body begins to show its limits. And if beside you there's someone without empathy, that loneliness multiplies. But if you live with someone empathetic, that loneliness transforms into warm companionship, even in the hardest moments. The empathetic one doesn't need great speeches. Sometimes it's enough with their gaze, their presence, a small gesture that makes you feel understood, and that feeling is priceless. The opposite also exists. Living with someone without empathy, someone cold, distant, incapable of understanding your inner world. That is painful, because it makes you feel invisible, and invisibility in old age is one of the greatest wounds. That's why, my friend, don't resign yourself. You deserve to be with someone who understands your soul, not just your body. Empathy is the foundation of the most authentic bonds. Because when someone understands what you feel, even if they haven't lived it themselves, an invisible bridge is created between hearts, and that bridge sustains more than any words. So I tell you from the heart, seek to live with empathetic people. People who don't laugh at your pain, who don't belittle your fears, who don't judge you for your fragilities. People who know how to simply be there. Because sometimes the best company is not the one that fixes everything, but the one that doesn't leave you alone in the middle of the problem. Remember something I want to leave engraved. Empathy is tenderness in action. And in old age, what we most need is precisely that, tenderness put into motion. I want you to pause for a moment with me and think about those people who don't just show up, but truly accompany you. Because it's one thing to have someone next to you, and another very different thing to feel that they are with you in body and soul. In maturity, that difference is huge. We're no longer here for pretense, for empty presences, for people who only take up space. We're here to live deeply. And living with someone who truly accompanies you is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. To accompany doesn't mean to run your life or solve everything for you. To accompany is to walk alongside, to support without suffocating, to be available without invading. It is a beautiful balance that only people with special sensitivity can achieve. Imagine this. You come home one day exhausted, maybe because of a health problem, or simply because your mood is low, and the person living with you says, "Sit down. I'll make us something nice. You rest for a while." That simple gesture carries enormous value because it tells you you're not alone. On the other hand, if you live with someone who never accompanies, who only expects to receive and never gives, the house becomes cold, soulless. And that in old age hurts more than any physical ache. Let me tell you the story of Rodolfo, a 68-year-old man I once treated. Rodolfo had always lived with someone, but he had never truly felt accompanied. His first wife criticized him for everything, made him feel useless. Later, when she passed away, he remarried, hoping for a different life. But the second relationship was the same. She was there physically, but emotionally distant. She never listened, never truly looked at him. When he came to see me, he told me a phrase that stayed with me. "Doctor, I live with someone, but I feel as if I'm alone in a crowded room." That is the absence of real companionship. One day, Rodolfo found the courage to end that empty coexistence. He spent some time alone, and though at first he felt afraid, he soon discovered something new. He began to surround himself with empathetic friends, with people who truly listened to him. And there he realized what he had never had before. Someone who truly accompanies. After a couple of years, he met a woman who wasn't just there, but knew how to be there. And with tears in his eyes, he told me, "For the first time, I feel my home has human warmth." That story reflects something I want to leave engraved in you. It's not enough to just have someone beside you. You need someone who truly accompanies. In old age, living with someone who accompanies can make the difference between bitter aging and one full of peace. And that kind of companionship doesn't require great sacrifices, just attention, care, and a genuine desire to share life. That's why, my dear friend, choose to surround yourself with people who know how to accompany you, people who hold your hand on gray days, who celebrate with you your small victories, who don't let you feel invisible. Because in the end, living together is nothing more than that. Being, feeling, sharing. There's something we sometimes forget when we think about living together in maturity: humor. Yes, just as you hear it. Humor is a vital ingredient because no matter how old you are, laughter is still a balm, a way to heal, to release tension, to make the days lighter. Living with someone who doesn't know how to laugh, who takes everything with excessive solemnity, ends up being a heavy burden. But sharing life with someone who finds sparks of humor in the little things transforms routine into a more livable place. In maturity, humor is not frivolity, it is wisdom. It is understanding that life already has enough pain, losses, and challenges without us adding more weight. And a sincere, shared laugh can soothe the heart more than many words. So I ask you, who would you rather live with? Someone who gets upset because the soup has too much salt, or someone who jokes and says, "Well, today we drink water instead of soup." That kind of attitude makes all the difference. The same thing happens with little household accidents. A patient once told me, "Doctor, my husband used to laugh when I dropped something in the kitchen, and that made me feel accompanied, because instead of reproach, there was tenderness." That tenderness mixed with humor is what fills a home with life. Humor in maturity also has a different flavor. It's no longer about heavy jokes or cruel pranks, but about finding the lighter side of daily life. Laughing together at forgetfulness, at repeated anecdotes, at new wrinkles, turning what could be a cause for worry into an excuse to smile. That's why, my dear friend, don't stay with someone who doesn't know how to laugh, because living without humor becomes gray. At this stage of life, what we need is color, fresh air, shared laughter. Notice that the people most remembered are not the ones who had the most possessions, but the ones who knew how to make others laugh, even in hard times. That's healthy living together. Being able to cry together when life demands it, but also to laugh wholeheartedly when life allows it. I'll tell you clearly, living with someone who keeps their sense of humor is living with someone who keeps hope alive. And in maturity, that is one of the greatest strengths you can have close by. I want us now to pause on something that seems simple, but actually defines the entire quality of a shared life: inner peace. If the person you live with doesn't have peace in their heart, sooner or later, that will affect your life. Because someone who lives full of rage, of stored-up anger, of unresolved resentments, will unload that turbulence onto you. And at this stage of life, the last thing we need is to carry someone else's storms. Peace is not the absence of problems. At 50, 60, 70, we already know problems will always exist. Peace is something else. It's the way each person chooses to face them. A person with inner peace knows how to stop before shouting, how to breathe before hurting, how to listen before judging. Living with someone without inner peace is like living in a house with walls that tremble all the time. You never know when the anger will explode. You never know if some tiny detail will turn into a huge fight. And that wears you out more than solitude ever could. Maturity should be the stage of greatest calm. But when you choose the wrong companion, that calm breaks, and what could have been rest turns into an emotional battlefield. You've seen those people who carry grudges from 30 years ago. People who still speak with bitterness about a brother, an ex, a neighbor. That accumulated poison seeps into daily life, and even though you had nothing to do with it, you end up breathing that toxic air. That's why it's vital to choose who you share your days with. Look for someone who has peace inside, because when someone is at peace with themselves, they can give peace to you. If not, all you receive is noise, anger, and tension. Inner peace shows itself in the little things, in how they speak to you, in how they resolve a misunderstanding, in how they react when something doesn't go as expected. A person in peace doesn't need to shout to impose, doesn't need to control to feel safe, doesn't need to belittle to feel strong. A person in peace transmits serenity. And look, peace is contagious. Just as anger spreads, so does calm. Living with someone in peace helps you yourself feel more serene, more balanced, calmer. Don't forget this. Peace is more valuable than uncontrolled passion, more lasting than physical beauty, more nourishing than any wealth, because peace sustains you when everything else fails. So if you're at the stage of choosing or deciding whether to continue living with someone, ask yourself, does this person give me peace or take it away? That is the key, because if there is no peace, there can be no shared life. Now I want us to close, not with a cold ending, but with one that invites you to keep thinking, one that leaves an echo in your heart. We've spoken all this time about the importance of choosing who to live with after 50, after 60. And if we had to sum it all up in a single phrase, it would be this: don't live with someone who takes more from you than they give. At this stage of life, we're not here to educate adults. We're not here to put up with what doesn't change. We're not here to fight old battles again. We're here to live with more calm, more simplicity, with relationships that nourish us instead of draining us. Because living together is not about enduring. It's about choosing well. And that choice, even though it sometimes hurts, even though it may involve hard decisions, is what marks the difference between a bitter old age and a peaceful one. Look, many people tell me, but I've already invested so many years in this relationship. And I always reply, the years invested are not a sentence to keep losing the rest of your life. The past does not force you to mortgage the future. If what you lived was not healthy, if what you shared was not fair, you still have time to say enough. On this journey, we talked about different profiles: the complainer, the controller, the selfish one, the aggressive one, the one who doesn't listen, the one who doesn't respect, the one without inner peace. They all have one thing in common. They drain your energy. They take life away. They make you feel like you don't belong. And no one deserves that. Both men and women need to understand this. This is not a message only for them or only for you. It is for every human being who no longer wants to resign themselves to living badly, because dignity has no gender. The right to peace has no age. If today you're listening and feel that you're living with someone who fits these descriptions, don't ignore it. Pay attention to your body, to your emotions, to that tiredness that sometimes can't be explained in words but is felt deep in your bones. That exhaustion is the signal that something is not right. Life after 50, after 60, doesn't have to be a decline. It can be the best stage if you choose well. It can be the freest, the most authentic, the calmest. But for that, you must dare to say no to relationships that make you sick. Keep this idea close. A dignified solitude is better than the wrong company. Well-lived solitude gives you freedom, gives you space, gives you time for yourself. But bad company steals all of that and more. And if you still have doubts, think of it this way. What do you want to leave to your children, your grandchildren, those around you? The example of someone who resigned, who accepted the unfair, who endured to the end, or the example of someone who dared to choose peace, to set a boundary, to prioritize themselves? Old age is not for crawling behind someone. It is for walking side by side, with respect, with tenderness, with shared joy. I thank you from the heart for staying until the end, for listening, for reflecting, for giving yourself this time. I hope everything we shared helps you open your eyes, make wiser decisions, and above all, remind you that you deserve to live in peace, accompanied by true love, or in the beautiful company of yourself. Because, in the end, living with yourself, with your own peace, with your own dignity, is the greatest gift you can give yourself. Yeah.